Hello and welcome to another jungle tutorial, and in this one we have, well, basically a lot of everything, understanding your win conditions not only within your jungle matchup, but also within the confines of the map and who is on your team and who's on the enemy team. Now if that sounds like a loaded statement with perhaps a lot of implications about what we have to do in order to secure a win, well that's because it is, and basically we have a Warwick vs Rengar game here. Understanding how to navigate around the enemy team comp and your team comp as a jungler, and knowing what you have to do in order to carry to a victory, is probably the most fundamental aspect of the role. And as you see the blue team conduct a unified invade of the Rengar's jungle, he always likes to start their red buff. If they can get any vision down, perhaps a first blood kill using the thresh hook, that would go a long way in suppressing him, and you'll see that the Warwick is in fact master tier and basically one tricks him, and the Rengar is, well, as you can see from the win rate, a nice spicy smurf. And before we get into the first clears after that invade, I just want to thank you all for the support in getting the channel to 100,000 subscribers. 2 years ago we basically had like 200, so we've come a long way, but it doesn't stop there, does it? So if you enjoy this video and want to see more, you know what to do. Now the implications of that invade are quite strong because it will suppress the Rengar to a degree, but how he bounces back from this little rough early game is actually quite impressive. What happens is, after doing his red and his Krugs, you'll notice most importantly is that the Warwick is doing red and then Krugs. And most people who watch this channel know in all my Warwick videos I tell you don't do this clear because it is too heavy on resources, it takes too long, and it restricts your early lane impact. And to a degree that is also true in this situation. However, you have to understand what lanes you want to gank and how you're going to go about navigating against the Rengar as well. You'll see as the Rengar hits to the Raptors, because of those two deep vision wards and the fact that the echoes versus Kassadin, it gives him the ability to shove and then invade. Simply trying to kill the Rengar, get in his face, annoy him, stop his clear, get him low, all of which he does successfully except, get the kill on the Rengar. And if the Kassadin had not rotated whatsoever, which I'm assuming most of you are thinking, well, no one rotates in my games, then you just leave. There's no point dying at your Raptors, they will still be there, Echo cannot solo them. But he's able to get the camp, move on down to his blue, and then the Scuttle Crab. The Warwick you would have seen did get very low on his Raptor camp, and that's why it's a risky play. If you're playing in an elo where someone might try and invade you at that stage, you will most likely die, and my thing about doing a full clear with him is that you delay that level 3 gank that you can get off before most junglers if you do a standard blue side and red buff clear. Obviously this will change with season 10, so keep that in mind. And as such, the Rengar is actually able to get the first blood on the bottom lane. A good hook by the Nautilus sets him up for that, and he's basically recovered from that invade by the Echo. A lot of lower mid MMR players will just start raging at the mid lane or at someone when they get invaded like that early, and they'll end up dying. It's no one else's fault. You see from the Rengar here, he keeps his composure, gets first blood. In the meantime, the Warwick has done his first full clear, gotten the crab, and he's ganking on the mid lane. He's able to secure a kill on the Kassadin, and now the two junglers meet, and this is what I was talking about, understanding your win conditions not only within the game, but within your matchup. Your E is on cooldown, it has a long cooldown early, you just used it. If you don't have your E, you're going to die. Don't even try float with the possibility you might be able to beat him. You would have looked up this op.gg before the game. You see he's got like 70 wins and 18 losses. Don't even mess around with giving him a free second kill. Obviously, you saw that Rengar did get that second kill very easily, and this sets up two very different ideas about how to navigate the early game from a jungle perspective, and that's what we want to focus on. So following that 1v1 kill, the Rengar is feeling very good about himself, does the wolves, does the grump, goes back to base to spend some gold. Our Chimera friend had died, so he already got a freebie back to base. He goes straight to Krugs to get level 5 and then immediately to the Drake. He knows that the Raptors and Krugs will be spawning second time as well for the Rengar, and he will most likely path up to that top side. But the IGN for the Rengar is actually rank 1 pathing, so he surprises us, skips the red side completely, lane ganks, and takes out a level 5 Kayle. And therein is the important aspect. Rengar ganked the Kayle pre-6, that's vital. If you have a Kayle, Kassadin, you must take them out, and of course you saw the Warwick do the same thing with the Kassadin earlier on. When you have scaling teams, both teams kind of go nicely into the late game. I'd say the worst champion in the game at getting to the late game here is actually the Warwick, and so his focus isn't necessarily on ganking as hard as the Rengar is going to. It's definitely about 100% enabling his lanes, his Echo, his bottom lane, specifically the Kayle, to have the tools they need to be able to carry later on when he is going to have a bit more of a tough time versus things like the Kaiser and the Kassadin. And you would have seen him taking that Drake in order to accomplish that mission. Now, unfortunately for him, he takes his Raptors and heads into his blue side jungle, but as you can see, the Rengar was intent on counter jungling a little bit. He knows he has an advantage 1v1 both mentally and in gold over the enemy jungler, so this isn't as risky as it might seem. And as soon as Rengar jumps on him, he basically backs off. He knows he's not going to win that anymore, and his focus isn't on beating the Rengar 1v1, it's on giving his laners the tools to succeed. But at the same time, we're going to see him have a very strong carry performance in this game. And because you can't match up to the Rengar in face-to-face battles, you want to be looking for the most opportunistic ganks, immediate rotations, and objective secures you can get based upon what he does. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still be looking for lane impact in some form. Nice little lane gank on the bottom lane after they'd engaged in a 2v2. He misses the ultimate, but that's absolutely fine. He is running Relentless Hunter. It's just a gap close, and is still able to get a kill. Now, if you are a mid lane player or someone who likes to play mid as well as jungle, look at the Echo, what he's doing here, shoving and roaming and getting deep vision. That is the most important counter to things like Evelynn, Xiaoguo, and Rengar. And the reason I point that out is because they were going to push some tower plates, but because they see the Rengar coming down from the Gromp, they know, let's not push it, he can jump out of the bush, it's still Kai'Sa. If we die here, that's, that could seal the fate of the game, especially in terms of jungle and bottom lane. So they do the intelligent thing and back on up. Now that gives the kitty priority on the Scuttle Crab, yes? The Warwick then wants to go to the top side, get a second blue buff spawn. Now there's a control ward on that buff, so as soon as he reveals himself on it, the Kassadin and the Rengar know it's time to 4-man gank bottom lane. This is essentially the biggest nightmare all ADCs and supports have. They know it's going to come at some point, doesn't matter who it is. If it's a Rengar and Kassadin, you know 100% it will happen. As such, what you're going to see in the bottom side is a very elongated skirmish of tower juggling aggro, punishing people coming back to the lane, and Rengar getting a whole bunch of kills and assists. In the meantime, our Warwick goes to the top side, lane ganks with the Kayle and the Jace. Now you could say, well, he should push it with her, get as many tower plates as possible, maybe even first tower. He doesn't do that. Give her solo tower plate gold. Kayle is the win condition. You are not the win condition. You can easily rotate, get kills, pick up objectives, and still be useful at some point in the game. Whereas Kayle, you want to spike her as much as possible, get as much golden experience as possible. Also, you're forgetting who this is. Yes, we got the Q buffs, which are basically like a revert to what he was at the beginning of 2018, but we also got those W buffs, and people seem to be forgetting about that. So yes, you still max W, which means you still run really fast at low HP enemies, which means when there's an elongated skirmish, as I mentioned before, with the Rengar and everyone hanging around low, even though your team is kind of just walking into them 1v1, the Rengar makes a nice play to get a double. Because they take so long with this messing around, the Kayle has gotten a kill, solo tower plates, you show up, with your Thresh you get a triple kill, and you deny them even getting one tower plate. Had Warwick stayed to hit with Kayle on the top side, this doesn't even happen, so it's a good heads-up play of solo gold to my Kayle, and I can rotate and take over the bottom lane and take over the game now. Because of this, and you'll notice he is building offensive, he wants a huge mid-game power spike, he doesn't want to be some kind of useless tank in the mid to late game, he wants to be able to fight with the Kayle, and that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But that play also nets them a Mountain Dragon, absolutely huge for an Echo, Ashe, and Kayle team. Understanding which Drakes match up to your team well is also one of the most vital aspects. This will change in Season 10, of course, when Drakes become easier to take and have much more of an impact on the map, so you need to prepare your mentality about how to go about securing these objectives based upon what your team is going to need. Now what happens next is the Warwick is going to have a little gank on the bottom lane again, get a cheeky assist, the Rengar is going to go top lane, force out the Kayle ultimate, Jace is going to dive and pick up a kill. Unfortunately he also dies, but you see there's a lot of opposite map side play with the junglers, and that's because Warwick knows he cannot match up with them, he cannot just go into counter ganks with him. Let him play on the other side of the map and play to the side that has the objectives and also the best chance of him picking up some kills and getting himself fed. Now because of this action, Echo, who's done a great job roaming, Kassadin had the bottom side roam, but the Echo has done a lot of deep vision control and side lane sweeping. He hasn't necessarily ganked much, but the fact that he can cut off lanes from the enemy Rengar as well as the Kassadin has been quite invaluable. Now he collapses on the top side, and to give you an idea of how strong this Rengar is, yeah, Rengar dies, but so does the Echo, within just a blink of an eye. He is definitely fed, he is definitely strong, but the Warwick says, that's okay, he's dead, thank you for the Rift Herald. Timing of the Rift Herald is very important. Remember, we talked about this in a video earlier in the year. Not only is taking it pre-14 most important, using it on those final two tower plates is almost the best outcome because of those increased resistances on the tower. You're not going to be able to take those two plates yourself very easily, but the Herald, she does true damage. So you activate the Herald, you chase down the Jace, you 2v1 the Rengar who's getting a little overzealous with how fed he thinks he is. This is a Kayle after all, and with 8 kills now, you're not exactly a puppy. Warwick identified his win conditions, made sure his farm sequencing was in a good position to get him those dragons, ganked a few times in the bottom lane, ganked a few times in the top lane, took things when the Rengar was dead and couldn't contest them. The Rengar's pathing was very good from a jungling perspective in terms of trying to shut down the Warwick, take his camps, and gank lanes, but it was all about getting himself fed and not necessarily enabling the rest of his team to carry. Obviously, it's very difficult to gank for a Kassadin versus an Echo, but it's just things to keep in mind as you go throughout the early game. So what Warwick does after the top lane play? Head to the bottom lane, go grab some more kills. However, this time they don't pay attention to the Rengar, and Warwick gives all that shutdown gold to the Kai'Sa, an absolute nightmare. You do not want to do that under any circumstances. A little bit of restraint sometimes is good. You can hit the tower as much as you can, back off, wait for the next wave. Don't put yourself in a position to give that kind of shutdown gold to an enemy carry who isn't exactly popping off at the moment. Castle Win and Rengar are able to chase down and get a few more kills. And once again, the game is in a little bit of an equal state. Now, we do have a nice, messy, and drawn-out endgame, but based on the subject of this video and understanding how to win within your team comp and versus the enemy team comp, we have a few notable examples about how the rest of the game played out. So your positioning based upon your team comp around these endgame, mid-game skirmishes and fights that opens up the possibility for taking those objectives is something I want to focus on. Here, for example, the Rengar got caught out, he's dead. Now, the Warwick immediately ults, he's sitting in front of the Kayle, immediately ults the Nautilus, the first target that is out of position. This locks him down, they're able to burst him out. Now, because he's in the middle of the enemy team, Kayle immediately ults him, he ensures that he flashes to get that damage off on the Kassadin. Remember, the Kayle ult does do damage when it comes down, and that's why the Kayle Kai'Sa kind of synergy and pro play is also so powerful. Now, once you get those two kills, you fall back, you take the Fire Dragon. What you don't want to do is, even though you have an offensive build, and you see in the following skirmish it's very messy, when one of your teammates gets picked off, against things like a Kassadin and a Rengar, when you're Warwick, you're not exactly going to have the best time if you have no other assistance. And getting one kill is great, he did miss his ultimate, but there's not much you can do versus the Kassadin, especially with this build. Now, you don't often see Black Clover on Warwick players, however this guy likes to rush this every single game, kind of like a Rek'Sai, aids in that little bit of stickiness that you need as a strong melee player. You just need to make sure you have teammates that can sort of build off of that armor shredding passive as well. Now, from the Rengar's point of view, he seems to have lost his purpose, he seems to have lost what the win conditions are for his team. He keeps thinking it's on him boasting the most fed member. He tries to get the Echo, but it's Echo and the Echo is pretty far ahead. His build path is also quite questionable. When you're versus a Thresh, an Echo, even a Kayle, that Edge of Night can prove way more valuable than the Yumu's. As you see in the bottom lane, he tries with a Kassadin to punish a split pushing Kayle, but the Warwick has enabled her, has funneled her, has given her the dragons necessary to be so far ahead that he just instantaneously dies. Because of this needless death, it gives the Warwick's team a free Baron. A few other late game things we need to talk about. After you go Baron, don't hang around and get caught out. Rengar benefits. But you see from the Warwick's build, he's actually able to sustain himself and take out the cat. But then he pushes too far and dies himself. Throw after bad position after bad position. You have the Baron, you can set up a 1-3-1, you can set up a 1-4-0, you can even just go 5-man team it because you have a Kayle. Rengar now with the addition of a Last Whisper item, he goes in and he's actually able to kill the Kayle in a 1v1 and sustain over her ultimate, that heal coming in very clutch. Sadly, an Ash Arrow has flown across the map and hits him right between, well, just the eye, I guess. And now he falls. Now, in terms of a 1-for-1 trade, you'd say the Rengar and the Kayle, it's a good trade. The problem is the Rengar is trying to carry the game, and so when he's dead, nothing else much can happen. And of course, none of these things happen as they're meant to, and now, of course, we have a Baron fight. The Warwick goes in, he's the frontline presence, he sustains, gets kills, CCs as long as he can before Kayle ults him, flashes in again to get the damage off, and even if you fall, the problem is you didn't really win the fight as a team because Ashe was in base. So going in for these engages is great, but you need to make sure the rest of your team is there. If she was dead, you can't really blame her for not being able to TP in when she doesn't have TP. And finally, this messiness goes on back and forth for a while, and the winning moment comes when Warwick and his team decide, you know what, we could 4-man mid lane. The Rengar is so obsessed with trying to annihilate the Kayle, he's lost his way, as I said before. He tries to 1v1 that Kayle again, and this time he is not able to do it. She's really reaching that late game power fantasy, and as such, it's a free inhib, little bit of a skirmish later, in a few minutes, they can actually end up shoving and win the game. So the whole purpose of this video is to understand which of your lanes needs to be funneled gold, which of your lanes need to have the most assistance, when can you secure those objectives. If you don't match up well with the enemy jungler, look for plays on the opposite sides of the map and play around his decision making, basically making counter moves that punishes his focus on himself. And when it comes to team fighting and skirmishes, know what to do within the framework of your team comp. He understood how the Kayle ult worked, he understood just to stand front, disrupt, and get off as much damage as possible. He made rotational picks, and he basically had dragon control the entire game. While Rengar's pathing was exemplary in terms of his ganking and 1v1 jungle pressure, he ended up making way too many over-aggressive moves and didn't itemize properly, and didn't prioritize his game plan around getting the Kassadin and the Kaiser ahead of the Chaos such that they could have the map control and end up winning. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn something. Please don't forget to like, share, and comment if you did. Also subscribe for future content just like this, and as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.
Hmm?